Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on the streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome and thanks for being here. I am happy to be joined by my good friend and partner in the hobby. You know him as Sports Card Therapist. Rob, how you doing tonight, man?
Ken. I am doing well, my friend. I'm doing very well. Just literally just got off a roundtable recording that is going to be airing on Friday. So I'm just riding high and pumped off that.
So before we started, we were talking about a new player, new basketball player. You want to just keep going on that?
Yeah, so I had asked you, I said, "Oh, do you know that player, that new prospect is coming in the NBA, Wemby?" And you said, "Yeah, of course. I bought 5 Sports Illustrated card for kids magazines um to get his card." I
It,
said,
it
"Yeah."
actually wasn't. It wasn't for him. Believe it or not, when I went to get those, it was for Alyssa Thompson. Was the number one pick in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. So she was in that. So that's why I ordered 5 of these magazines, and then come to find out that this kid's going to be a huge star, right? So I kind of lucked out.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. So the roundtable I just recorded a few minutes ago before I got on with you is the um in-person in-person on-card autographs, right? It was considered very taboo for many years. Now it seems like people in the hobby are starting to come around on them. I wouldn't necessarily say they'll ever be as popular or famous as pack pulled rookie autos, but it is what it is. So this guy I had on, he said, "Yeah, so I have some connections overseas." So I reached out to a guy I know overseas and offered to buy him basketball tickets to go see Wemby play. And I mailed him internationally 2 of Wemby's cards from Sports Illustrated for Kids. And because I bought him basketball tickets, he actually got them signed for me, and now he's sending them back. And I go, "Oh my God, man, that is like hustle on another level. That's incredible." He goes, "No, you want to know what's hustle on another level? Is the guy from overseas said, well, if you want me to get him signed, you're gonna have to get me tickets right behind the bench." So, but it worked out though,
Yeah.
and so just to kind of piggyback off that thought real quick. So rookie autos, right? And in person on card rookie autos, you think of like a vintage card, and that athlete autographing it. That's been something that's been frowned upon for so long. But I asked these gentlemen on there, I said, "Well, what do you think is the reason?" Because I know for the last 12 to 18 months, that's really all I've been getting. I've been getting other stuff here and there, right? But my main PC, like my bottom row stuff, has been all the in-person authenticated on-card autos. So he said that this new generation in the hobby from, maybe the last, like, 10 to 15 years or so, they've become infatuated with pack pulled rookie autos. Like the rookie auto is the big thing now. So as people start to look back and they say, well, Michael Jordan didn't have a pack pulled rookie auto. Larry Bird didn't. Kareem Abdul Jabbar, Lou Alcindor, 69 tops, he didn't. So there's been, I think, increased interest in these types of cards. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, if you had an index card in your hand, or should I say a baseball, if you had a baseball in your hand and a Mickey Mantle 52 tops rookie, and Mickey Mantle was sitting right in front of you for an autograph, most people would give him the ball to sign because that's how
Yeah.
taboo it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, you look at the value of those cards now. It was so frowned upon to have them. So is it because it was so frowned upon that they're more rare, that they're that much more valuable? Or, we today are looking at it like, wow, this person actually held this card. They autographed this card. That becomes more special than, a card that was, just actually more recent, an ultra modern card that was just pack pulled, that somebody was sitting in their kitchen or something, just autographing these labels. Because a lot of those cards that come today, in 90% of those sets, they're all sticker autos, right? Any ultra modern stuff, it's all sticker autos until you get up to the national treasures and flawless and things like that. you know, so where's the value of it? Is there value because it's scarce because it was taboo, or was it's valuable because it's a card that's, a little bit better than a non-side card?
Oh, it's definitely both. It's the whole package for sure. It's definitely the whole package. Knowing that player actually held this card, and you know, even aside from the aesthetics of the card, on card auto just always looks better than sticker, right? Even so, taking into account what it looks like, and then taking into account that the athlete probably, I mean, definitely never even touched that card. If it's a sticker auto, he never touched that card. He might not have even touched the label other than the tip of the pen. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think when you start to factor in vintage, right? Vintage is not low pop for the most part, unless you're getting up in the eights, the nines, and the tens, the PSAs. Vintage isn't low pop. There's a lot of vintage that was printed. Now, eye appeal is always built differently. Also, you throw an auto on top of that. That's also a differentiator. Like when it comes to modern, when it comes to super modern, it's the one and only differentiator is the grade, right?
Mhm.
Typically, it's always going to look the same. Very rarely is it going to be super off center. Very rarely is it going to be miscut. Very rarely. So really, it's the grade that makes things a little bit different, and that's it. Whereas with the vintage and especially the on-card autos, now you're starting to talk about. I mean, you're factoring everything there is with vintage, right? With the registration of the card, which means the clarity of the picture, being off center, being miscut, all these different things. Eye appeal plays such an important role in vintage. Now you start talking about an on-card auto in the mix, and
Mm.
that just takes it to a new level.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love it. I think it's incredible.
Mhm. And some of these guys aren't even alive anymore, right? So
A
so
lot of
there's
them,
nothing. What's that?
a lot of them aren't alive
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. So there's not like there are going to be more things to be signed, and I compare that because MySpace, the ultra modern, right? And I just think back, and I think we both owned a similar card, like a Justin Herbert card, right? That was hand signed. But we go to the shows now and you see almost everybody owns one of those cards, right? So it's not something special anymore, not like a vintage card that was signed by somebody that is not even alive anymore, like that type of thing. It just makes it that much more rare and that much more special. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so
Okay.
I think I'm curious. Like, I know Mike Tyson doesn't sign cards anymore, right?
Mhm.
So if he did sign cards, would you have had that thing cracked out? Like, even if someone offered to crack it out for you so that you wouldn't risk the damage kind of thing, you wouldn't have cracked it out and had him sign it?
No, no, I would have kept it just the way it is.
That likely would have made it a pop one,
Yeah,
you know?
maybe, but it wouldn't have been the only one. Right?
No?
It wouldn't have been the only one if he was still signing cards. Everybody who owned one would find him. He's at signings. People are messaging me all the time. Oh, he was here. He was there. He was in Michigan. He was in Minnesota. Every one of those would have been signed, I think.
So does he only go to states that start with M? So
well, he was in New York, right, or New Jersey, wherever the American Dream Mall was. So I
yep.
guess that.
So the thing is, I think the Hulk Hogan, I think they all have the same pop, like across the board. Like, I think they're all right around like between pop 30 and 35, which means out of the full sets, only 30 or 35 have been graded because it's likely, you know, people are just getting their full set graded. But I think the Hogan, there's only one signed. That's the only one I'm aware of. I think there's only one signed and it auctioned like 6 to 8 months ago.
Oh, okay.
So, but I don't
Okay.
know. I guess it was just throwing it out there. I'm kind of curious
Yeah.
where you're
It's
at on
interesting
that.
you say that because I didn't even think of that. I guess I would have to look because there's a whole set, right? That Tiger Woods, Oscar De La Hoya. I wonder,
Yep.
how many of those have people have actually autographed them and have those
I bet
autographed.
Tiger's never autographed one, and if he did, it probably isn't graded.
Yeah.
I mean, Tiger
Yeah.
Tiger doesn't sign much, so you start looking into that. You know, Tyson, one of the ways he makes money is by signing. Same thing with Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan.
Yeah.
So
You go online, there's a million autographed Mike Tyson cards out there. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
um,
So look, your roundtables are going very well, right? Your month of roundtables are going really great, and I wanted to, you know, first off, just congratulate you on how good they are because I've been keeping up. I'm your biggest fan, right? Watching them, and the most recent one you did, polarizing figures, with Geoff Wilson and the Great Curator, just just giving them, creating, and I'm going to say this, creating kind of a safe space for people who have kind of become a punching bag in the hobby, right? So first of all, just kind of your idea, your thought pattern when you were kind of putting these two together and putting this together, and just you know at the end, I'm going to give you a two-part question. And at the end, when you after you were done listening to it, were you satisfied with the outcome? Was there a lot of shoulda couldas? Like, how did you feel about that?
no, yeah, and I appreciate the kind words on the roundtables, man. And if you're watching on YouTube, I just had to go get my son real quick, so I'm actually holding him right now. But
he's
um,
make he's making his first appearance on the Sports Card Lessons podcast.
yeah, yeah, he is for sure. So he actually appeared on the bounce last year, right after he was born with Amil. so 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 yeah, YouTube is watching him grow, I guess. So as far as the roundtables, man, I tell you, it's been incredible. It's been a great experience. It's been so much fun doing them. And yeah, it is really cool to think that I am helping to provide a safe space for people to really open up. And that sounds kind of corny, like especially when you're talking about just like some of the vintage roundtables and stuff, but to get back to your, the first part of your question, which is really about Geoff Wilson and Dan the Great Curator. Yeah, it was really important that I, try to. I mean, here's the thing. Geoff Wilson, sports card investor, he does not address any of the controversies and negativity that he encounters on a daily basis in the hobby, right? There's a big section of the hobby. I don't know about big, but there's a loud section of the hobby that just really does not like him and is very accusatory toward him. But he doesn't ever address that stuff on any of his channels or brands. So, when I reached out to him, I asked him if he, how he'd feel about doing this kind of like, it would be a kind of a tough interview. I told him I wasn't going to throw him softballs because if I threw him softballs, he would gain no credibility and I would lose credibility. So
Mhm.
for me, it was important to let him know that I was going to, try to take all emotion out of it and I was going to throw him some, tough questions. And I didn't give him a heads up as to what the questions were going to be. But I asked him about some of the things that he's been accused of, how he's handled the negativity. Asked him about some of his failed, ventures that he's tried, like NFTs, and and let them know that there are some people out there that are like pissed off when you try to develop things like NFTs and basically it feels like try to poach sports card collectors and people in the hobby to start collecting something totally different. There's people in the hobby that do not like that stuff. So to make a long story short, he was incredible with his answers. um he didn't dodge oh he didn't dodge any questions. He didn't dodge any questions. And he was just very, very direct, very direct. And I was appreciative of him for coming on, and hopefully yeah, I mean, I've spoken with him multiple times since the interview, and it seems like he's gotten incredible feedback on it, and he was just really appreciative that he could answer some of those tough questions and kind of clap back at some of the people that have been negative toward him, and do that on a pretty decent sized platform that I have, and not have to do it on his own platform and kind of maybe tarnish the image he's built up by clapping back.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, like, you know, when you make mistakes in doing anything, if you could try to correct the mistakes or make an attempt to correct the mistakes, says a lot about your character, right? So, when he was talking about the NFTs and things like that, when I was listening to it, I mean, one of the most important things he was putting out there was saying, he was making people whole, at the end. He was making sure nobody was out. Now, I know you got feedback, what, both positive and negative, right? So as the creator, the content creator, talk a little bit about, you know the comments you got back, your positive stuff and some of your negative stuff too, like what people's thoughts were, because you know as I ask you that question, there's probably things that people are firing at, because I was reading some of the stuff, and people were talking about stuff. I had to literally go back and try to look some of this stuff up, because it was like, oh, I had no idea about this, right? So, as you getting comments back, were they all pretty like, yeah, I was expecting this, or were some of them like, I really had to check it out?
No, yeah, I think overwhelmingly, the reaction, it was I could probably split the reactions, like, up in quarters. I would say probably, like, a quarter of the reactions were like, "Oh, man, I cannot believe you provided such, like, a really cool, unique environment for them to really clap back at some of these people and explain themselves," not just clap back, because I didn't wanna give give them a platform to clap back on. That's not what I was trying to do. I know I've used that phrase multiple times now, but, um that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was also trying to get some real answers out of them and not give them like wiggle room, if that makes sense, you know? So probably like 25% of the comments were, like, that was amazing. You did a great job. I was so glad to hear it. Another 25% were like, yeah, enjoyed the episode, but I still don't like them, and these are the reasons why. Then another 25%, probably more than that though, they were like, "Oh, I actually like Jeff and Dan." Like the guys in my vintage chat, I've talked about this on my on the Wolfpack solo episode I did that dropped this week. The vintage chat that I have that I'm a part of, there's like 30 guys in it. Almost every single person was like, "Oh, I really like Jeff. He does a lot of good stuff for the kids." And so they weren't negative. And then um I think, the other 25% was pretty neutral. So really, I think probably only a quarter of it was negative. A quarter
Mhm.
of it was negative at the most. I had one guy approach me at Fenway that was kind of, something triggered him. But other than that, it's been pretty good, surprisingly good.
Yeah.
And I've had people that I thought were gonna, be upset that I had them on, because there's some people that just don't like them.
Yeah.
And they've even been pretty cool with it. So
Mm. And I think too, people that have come into the hobby more recently too don't know a lot of the backstory, right? So, it's probably, and again, we called it a safe space, but just for them to kind of give both of them, even Dan too. I mean, we've been talking about Jeff, but even Dan too, kind of, just tell their story a little bit and talk about, give their sides of certain things. But it doesn't mean that, right, you're jumping on one side or another, and that's what the cool thing about being a content creator, right? You don't have to agree or disagree, but if you create a space for somebody to come out and tell their side of the story or what's going on, it's always it's nice to be neutral, and it's nice to be able to create that space.
yeah, and absolutely, man. So one thing that I'll say about Dan, the great curator, and I've talked about this on my show, like he's someone who's turned into, I guess I don't know, say a friend, but he's turned into, yeah, probably a friend in the hobby, and um, you know, even though we've never actually met in person. Like we've known each other over a year, just never met in person. But spent a lot of time talking, communicating, and whatnot. But regardless, and I don't care what people think about that. There's a lot of people that don't like him, and I have no problem saying that out loud. That like, hey, he's someone I talk to. But what I wanted to do is, and I let him know this, and if anything, I'll lose any kind of relationship I have with him before I lose my integrity as like my podcast, right? So I, before the episode, said to Dan, like, listen, man, like I'm gonna ask you the questions. And he was like, good, because I think my impression, anyways, not that we've talked about it much, but my impression is like he he defends himself, I think, to a degree, or at least even a little bit on his channel, but it seems like he's not really swaying anyone by doing that, right? He's not swaying anyone because the people that watch him probably support him. And if you don't like him, chances are you aren't watching his channel. So he was looking forward to coming on my platform and kind of confronting some of these things and explaining himself, because I had some tough questions for him too. And like I said, I would much rather lose any relationship I have with him before I like brought him on my podcast and threw him softballs.
Yeah.
Because the listeners will see right through that. And that's
Yeah.
like the last thing I want to do. I want to establish myself, and I think I have, as someone that, if there's tough questions to be asked, I will. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you've shown that over the, all these seasons and on the podcast with anybody that you've had on. I remember the Probstein interview, coming right out and asking about shilling and things like that. So I know you, and I know you like to ask those tough questions sometimes, right? You like to ask those questions that everybody wants you to ask.
listen, I'll put on a dress and become Barbara Walters if I have to.
There's a sight.
You've seen it before.
Yeah. So look, we're 10 months since the last national, and that 10 months in this hobby feels like it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, over that time since last July, like some of the bigger lessons you've learned in the hobby. Like sports card lessons were all about lessons, right? So just like for you, some lessons learned in the hobby.
Well, one lesson that I just learned tonight actually was that I shouldn't crack out a card and send it out to someone to get regraded. but
Uh,
but I'll let you share that story another day, because I'm
yeah,
sure I'm
yeah,
sure there's some episodes coming up. I wasn't really prepared for that question, so I don't have any like great answers. Um, you know, I just I feel like a couple lessons I've learned is not to you can't do the hobby perfect, and don't try to be perfect. So when something feels good in terms of cards, lean into it, and because I always kind of stayed in the middle lane, I think, so to speak. And um you know, even though the seasons of the podcast are broken up differently, I think back to last July, and I had my LeBron card for about 5 months at that point, and that's I kind of leaned into that fast lane, and I leaned into the fast lane though, not the slow lane, and now I'm probably operating somewhere in that middle lane, I think is probably a better way to put it. And but when I like something, I'm leaning into it, and when it feels good, I'm leaning into it. And I've been collecting a lot more Giants and Yankees cards. I'm buying a lot more raw. I'm putting a lot more things in binders. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like
yeah,
getting back to like the roots of it,
yeah.
And I say that after I just bought a Mahomes rookie auto. But other than that, though,
I'm
other
I'm
than
trying to I'm trying to think back. Did you have any vintage? I mean, were you
oh, of
in the
course, oh
vintage?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that I
yeah.
had my big Willie Mays flip. I had my big Willie Mays flip.
Oh,
I
yeah,
bought
yeah,
the
yeah,
Willie
that's
Mays,
right.
and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I've been really hard into vintage now for
mm,
coming up on 2 years. Yeah, coming
yep,
up on 2 years is when because from the start, even and I was collecting way before I started the podcast, but from episode one, I talked about how at the top of my PC pyramid was Mickey Mantle and Hulk Hogan,
mm,
so I've always had that vintage bug,
yeah,
and when I think about it too, is, it's never a modern Mickey Mantle card. it's only the vintage playing day Mickey Mantles that I always liked. And even the Hulk Hogan, whenever I've said Hulk Hogan, I wasn't talking about anything modern or super modern. In my mind, it was always the 82 All-Stars and always the 85 Topps rookies, so it's always been vintage for me. I think I just never put on that vintage cap until probably
Mhm.
about 18 months ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I could remember setting up with you with all those 82 All-Star cards, and
The
people
Wrestling
would just
All-Stars?
what's that?
Yeah, the 82 Wrestling All-Stars.
Yeah, yeah, when people would just stop in their tracks, just to stop and reminisce about the just those cards in general. That was and
Yeah.
how much you've built your Hogan collection since then, right?
Yeah, and you know what too? So last week, and just like an on a whim, I put my Hogan collection together and I took a picture of it and I posted it online at a really good price too for the lot. I think it was something like 11K or something like that. I was asking for basically most of my big Hogans because I was going for some pretty big cards and I was going for that George Mikan type 1 photo, and it's
Mhm.
just like I was really setting my sights high, almost like reminiscent of when I got the LeBron rookie auto,
Mm,
like going for something like really swinging for the fences.
yeah,
But it didn't happen, and but I'm still here, man. It's
yeah.
all it did was enable me by me not getting the George Mikan Type 1 photo on the PWCC Premier auction a couple weeks ago. That enabled me to pick up like 4 huge cards. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
my Mantle autos that I
yeah.
recently got, which I'm just like blown away by.
Mhm.
The Mahomes National Treasure. So I feel good about it, man. I'm
Mm,
feeling,
yeah,
I'm active.
yeah. That so I know you mentioned your LeBron card, and I know the price is down since you've purchased it. Um, eh, just a question that just came to mind, another one you're not expecting, but do you believe in that card enough that if you saw one at another similar at a good price, would you jump into it?
Yes, and did I say this to you, or was I just thinking it in my head? When we saw one, I think there's one. Is it running on Golden? Is it tonight? I forget what.
Oh yeah, I
But
sent that to you. I sent a picture of
you
that to
did
you.
send it to me.
Yeah,
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 I would
yeah,
absolutely. I was thinking about making a run at that one I was posting on Golden, and I think we know the person whose that is because these cards just never pop up. These
yeah,
cards never pop up. So when they do, it's usually the same one or two of them that just keep on getting flipped
yeah,
because the other 200 of them that were ever printed are either still in boxes or they're just in a long-term collection like mine is.
yeah. And that's what we say. You see that a lot with these cards, these higher end cards. Well, in our area, you'll see them show up at the shows, and people will, try to sell them at the shows and move them around the shows, and then eventually, if nobody buys it, you'll see it either on, the PWCC or another one of the auction sites, and then it kind of gets it gets sold, and then it starts its journey again around, around the sites, and people see it, and I guess what is it, time market, right? 'Cause you really can't call that a hot potato on that card because that's a big card to be hot potatoing, or any of those big cards like that. It's you hope that they end up in the hands of a collector, right? And not just somebody who wants to buy it and reflip it again. Like you bought that card and you've held that card and you believe in that card as a collector. So you hope those cards, end up in the hands of a collector and not just continue to people try to flip it.
Yeah, and God forbid, like worst case scenario, like say you pick up a PSA 8 or a PSA 9 or something like that, and you run into one guy who just tries to be greedy, and then they crack out a card like that LeBron card, then they try to alter it, and then it ends up ruining the card forever, and now it'll never get a grade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a big chance to take, a real big chance to take. So, so look, man, I see you have your hands full with my little buddy there. So I'll let you go and get him back to bed. But I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate this every other week getting together. I really look forward to these.
Likewise, man. Likewise, I appreciate it very much, and yeah, this is what happens, when you're home, the wife's not home, and I still think I can podcast. That's what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. Well,
The
you
little
can
guy
still do it.
decides to wake up.
Yeah. The little man's always invited. He can always come hang out. You got to get him a little chair with a little microphone, and you just set him up there, right? Give him a little sports card therapist T-shirt.
All right, man. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, man. Listen, you're coming up on episode 100 soon. Just want to say congratulations, man. And you've just been killing it, man. Thank you. You are a must listen every week.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please like, definitely subscribe, and most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. And until next time, be good to yourselves and everyone around you. Take care, Rob.
Dude, appreciate it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty.